Some aid has entered the besieged Damascus suburb of eastern Ghouta, but for an estimated population of 400,000, aid sufficient for only 40,000 has been made available. Aid agencies have warned that the humanitarian crisis is deepening. Here's more on what's really going on.
47 trucks carrying food for 40,000 people have rolled into the Damascus suburb of eastern Ghouta, providing relief for some of the people who have been under siege by the Syrian army for the last 4 years. Eastern Ghouta is about 15 kilometers from Damascus, Syria's capital city. It is 380 square kilometers in size, and the current population is estimated at 400,000. Eastern Ghouta was one of the hubs of the uprising against the Syrian government in 2011. Now it is one of the de-escalation zones brokered by Iran, Turkey and Russia. But it is under attack due to the presence of anti-Assad groups, including the Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. The Syrian army has encircled the eastern Ghouta, often stopping the movement of food trucks into the enclave. Cases of starvation have been reported. Doctors in the enclave say malnutrition among children is on the rise.
ما عندي حليب والله ما عندي حليب يا أمي حليب البقرة غالي يعني واللبن غالي كله غالي يا أمي
Medical supplies have dwindled since the siege began, and the government embargo is preventing fresh supplies from coming in.
الحالة العامة للطفل بشكل عام سيئة. الطفل اللي نحن بنعتبره طبيعي ضمن الغوطة هو طفل عنده الحد الأدنى من الوزن الطبيعي، يعني تقريبا ما عندنا أطفال أصحاء بشكل كامل. السبب الرئيسي هو عوز المواد الغذائية. المجموعة الأسباب الثانية هي أسباب ثانوية.
There are few operational medical facilities. Most have been shelled and destroyed. The black market is flourishing. On the streets of Ghouta, a kilogram of sugar can cost you more than $10 compared to $4 in central Damascus. The human cost of the Syrian conflict is enormous, and as in all such wars, it is the civilian population which pays the heaviest price. Aid to eastern Ghouta is a drop in the ocean given the enormity of the crisis. Perhaps a humanitarian corridor is the only alternative. Daniele Pagani for WION.
And to throw further perspective onto this developing story, we are joined in by our correspondent from Tehran, Maral Gulampur, joining us. Maral, how is Iran reacting to this announcement by Saudi Arabia? What is the media saying at this point?
Hello and good afternoon. Well, the news just came out this morning, and Iran's dailies are expected to report on this tomorrow. But online outlets and media agencies are picking this up. For instance, Iran's international channel, Press TV, provided a linkage between this event and Michael Flynn's role in the so-called Trump-Russia collusion case. As you know, reports have recently came out accusing U.S. President Donald Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, of secretly promoting Russian nuclear power technology in Saudi Arabia. But the broader argument is in Iran is the irregularities in Saudi Arabia's decision to develop nuclear plants. It can be perceived by some as part of the plan called Saudi Vision 2030, which is a plan to reduce Saudi Arabia's dependence on oil and price. But this extraction, uranium extraction,
Mara, will just come back to you now. This is against the backdrop of a nuclear crisis. Saudi Arabia is planning to extract its own uranium as part of its nuclear power program. Saudi officials have said the benefits of the move are multifold, ranging from achieving self-sufficiency in producing atomic fuel as well as for economic development. However, the head of the Saudi agency tasked with nuclear plans did not say if Saudi Arabia also plans to enrich and reprocess uranium, which are both sensitive steps as they can allow uranium to be used for military purposes. Saudi Arabia is the world's biggest oil exporter and has said it wants to tap atomic power solely for peaceful purposes and to diversify its energy supply. Saudi Arabia would be the third country in the Gulf Arab region to tap nuclear power after Israel and the United Arab Emirates, which is set to start up its first South Korean-built reactor in 2018. The Saudi move is being seen against the backdrop of the Iranian nuclear program. Let's go back across to our correspondent from Tehran, Maral Gulumpour, joining us for more on this. Maral, as you were just telling us, the latest on how these developments are being viewed by the media there.
Yes, as I was saying, there is, great arguments, pointing at the questionable strategy by Saudi Arabia. So first thing is that mining uranium in Saudi Arabia doesn't seem like a viable economic plan, because Saudi Arabia doesn't have a major uranium reserve in comparison to other countries, and low concentrations of low-grade uranium makes it a costly venture. On top of that, Saudi Arabia just recently set up joint investment fund for development of uranium mining in another country, in Jordan, in May of 2017. So Jordan is the 16th biggest uranium reserve in the world, and maybe Saudi Arabia could have already get standard amounts of higher-grade uranium for cheaper from Jordan, where it has already invested. And second is that Saudi Arabia is launching this initiative at a time where there are better options available, and other countries are turning to green and renewable energy, which is more efficient and cost-effective. And the same criticism for developing nuclear towards Iran during the nuclear plant controversies. So, nuclear power, they discussed that nuclear power is dangerous, it's dirty, it's expensive, and it's ironic. When Iran was developing its nuclear power plant, all the argument on an international level was that there is no logic for investment in nuclear power, suggesting that Iran may have alternative motivations, for instance, to develop nuclear arms. But now that the same countries that banned and accused Iran, which are allies of Saudi Arabia, are silent and maybe even assisting the country to develop nuclear plants, in Iran, these actions and double standards are perceived as an act of hypocrisy by some Western countries.
All right, Maral, and do they also welcome the UN aid, which has reached them? Sorry, I beg your pardon. We are also, of course, looking at the reactions coming in from the world over. But give us a sense of also how, apart from the local media reports, what are the reactions that we're getting from the world over?
Well, you see, Iran and Saudi Arabia have been entangled in a regional rivalry, and media has extensively reported on this. However, this growing political rivalry has been expanding to every aspect of two societies. At the moment, some foreign media are praising Saudi Arabia for taking these measures, but again, this measure is tainted by politics, so much so that it has also raised so many questions. For instance, Saudi Arabian Crown Prince have taken several measures within the past months, and it has been reflected in various ways in different media. For instance, he has established social reforms to introduce a more moderate Islam. He's also trying to renew infrastructures of Saudi Arabia, and these new laws allow for hopefully better quality of life in Saudi Arabia. But when you think that these reforms are happening from top to bottom, and how there is potential of these plans backlash against the regime when it is implied in a traditional society, then you will see that how it could affect the social and political fabric of Saudi Arabia in the near future.
Maral, also, is there a feeling in Iran that the Saudi nuclear program may not be restricted to just energy generation and may also soon lead to nuclear weapons?
Well, yes, that could be a concern, but like I said, you see, at the moment, growing political rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia is expanding to every aspect of two societies. It's not only military or economic or the fear of nuclear arms, it's even social and cultural domains of each country which is being affected and harmed. For instance, when Saudi Crown Prince introduced reforms for Saudi women, these new laws, for instance, allow Saudi women to drive and to enter sports stadiums, and several Saudi women were appointed as ministers and members of cabinet, which is unprecedented and also very commendable. But this comes right during a time when in Iran, for instance, women's rights movements are aspiring and striving to secure more liberty and right for Iranian women, and they are making very slow progress. And it is happening in a context where so many Iranians consider themselves as, and their societies to be inherently and historically more progressive than Saudi Arabia. So it is disheartening for many Iranians to see, while they are fighting to make reforms from bottom to top, their neighbor is making milestones overnight in social domains, or even arms and economic and the military and other areas. And we know that, like I said, how top to bottom reforms can somehow backlash in traditional societies, because that is exactly what caused Iranian Islamic Revolution in 1979, about 37 years ago. So a primary result of this rivalry in Iran on social level has been since causing social
All right, we're going to leave it there for the moment, Maral, but we do appreciate all of those details coming in. That is a sense of the kind of reactions that have been coming in on that developing story. But we are now turning our attention back to the latest coming in from Syria, where some aid has entered the besieged Damascus suburb of eastern Ghouta, but for an estimated population of 400,000, aid which is sufficient for only 40,000 has been made available. Aid agencies have also warned that the humanitarian crisis is deepening there. Let's take a look at the ground report.
47 trucks are carrying food for 40,000 people have rolled into the Damascus suburb of eastern Ghouta.
Let's go across to further voices joining us on the broadcast. We are going to be also keeping a close track on the kind of aid that has come in. But let's get in further voices on this developing story. We do have Firaz Abdullah, who's joining us from eastern Ghouta for more on this. Firaz, let's quickly ask you what the situation is like in a city which is under siege since the year 2013.
Yes, eastern Ghouta actually has been under siege since more than 4 years. In the middle, the siege started in the middle of October in 2013 until now by Assad regime forces, and until now there is no less in medication, less in goods, and less in everything requires of life. And until this moment, the people, civilians here, live under a hard siege with daily bombing and with different types of weapons, such as mortars and different shelling, and in addition to airstrikes of Assad regime air forces.
Firaz, also, do they welcome the UN aid which has reached them today?
Hello?
Yes, Firaz, if my voice is going through too, we understand that network is a bit of an issue there given the circumstances, but do the people on ground at this point welcome the UN aid which has reached them?
Yeah, actually people have made anger protest to appear they're upset about the reaction of the United Nations for all humanity cases and for their cases, especially for their cases. And they made their protest in front of the convoys of the United Nations to say that we don't want your aid. We don't want aid. All we want is to break the siege of eastern Ghouta. That was the main demand of the protest that the civilians, the besieged civilians, have made yesterday, and they have been demanding that since 4 years ago and until this moment.
Firaz, also
actually
yes.
the aids don't they are not enough for only 10% of the besieged people. We have 350,000 besieged inhabitants besieged.
Firaz, also, we are talking about an area which has seen a siege for the last few years. Help us understand what the people have really been talking about, given the fact that hunger is the most immediate concern now that the war is over.
Can you please repeat the last question, because the internet is really bad?
Sure. Firaz, we understand that there have been desperate appeals that have been coming in, but people on ground now faced with hunger and the impending danger of running out of resources, or the lack of it, of course, is something which is coming down upon an area which has been under siege for the last few years. What exactly have the people around you been saying, and what exactly are their plans for now?
Yeah. They just they have made with us this a media campaign under the name of Assad besieged Ghouta. This media campaign to say to the world that we have been besieged for a last period. So the siege is a war crime, and it must be broken and immediately. So this is they plan for living day by day, and not for tomorrow. They don't know even if they are going to live for tomorrow or not, because of the siege and because the daily bombing on them. And because of that, they raise their voices to break the siege and by the international society, and to push by the people of the world on the Security Council.
All right, Firaz, appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. We do hope that some positive respite comes in for the people of Eastern Ghouta and where you are. We're going to leave it there for the moment. Appreciate you joining us on the broadcast with all of those details and getting us a sense of what things are like on ground as we look at this humanitarian crisis which is staring Eastern Ghouta and the nearby areas.